Hey everybody, Tom Barnes, stories from the 78. A big guest on the 78 today. Bruce Sudano started his career with Alive and Kicking, went on to Brooklyn Dreams, and songwriter extraordinaire. He co-wrote with Tommy James of Tommy James and the Shondells, also co-wrote for Donna Summers. He ended up marrying Donna Summers, and now he's got a new album out that, well, came out in 2024, but we're talking music and history and all the things in between now. How you doing, Bruce?
All right, Tom, I'm doing great today. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm talking to a musical legend here. So I mean, I'm having a Friday.
Well, I personally rebuff the legend notification. I think I'm a working songwriter. Carrie have had a long career, but I don't think I qualify for legendary status. But I appreciate the compliment and
Well,
the intent.
you've written, I mean, you've been on American Bandstand. You talked to Dick Clark. You married Donna Summers. And you have had your own musical career. You've written with Tommy James and the Shondells. I mean, you've done some great things. So let's leave it
Absolutely.
at
I'll
yeah.
grant you that. I'll grant you that. But I think I'm still working towards legendary status.
Well, hey, you know what? We all could continue to work on ourselves, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But I mean, we before we got started, you were mentioning, ask me where I am, and I'm here in Chicago. Where are you?
I'm in Los Angeles. I kind of spend my life between LA and Milan, and then another part of the time just traveling around doing shows and things like that. But today I'm in LA.
Well, it sounds rough being splitting your time between LA and Milan.
Well, yeah, I mean, you know, maybe you can work on this for me, Tom. Can you
Sure.
arrange it so that there's a direct flight from LA to Milan, so I don't have to connect somewhere? It would make my life a lot easier.
Ah, I bet. I mean, how are you out there in LA? Do you have like a place out there that you stay? Is it, was it
Yeah.
affected in the areas of the fires and all that stuff?
I had to evacuate one night,
Oh man.
but fortunately, where I am, the fire was quelched almost immediately. So, the following morning, I woke up to go home. So
Well, it's
I
good
was
to
like,
hear,
yeah,
and I imagine your place in Milan is doing well, as well. I
I
should say.
hope so.
Yeah. So I mentioned a little bit about your career, and we'll start right now what you've been doing, and then we'll kind of talk a little bit about what things you've done in your past. But because the 2024, you released an album that kind of was almost like really each song had purpose that embodied the entire album, right?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of always turns out that way. Most of the time, it's not really intentional.
Hmm.
Uh, but I guess when I'm in a pocket of writing, my mind and my heart and are floating around, similar extremities, and so when I put together the songs, there seems to be a common somewhere related purpose.
Do you like having the autonomy of kind of doing your own thing as a singer songwriter versus being in a band or writing for somebody else as you've done previously in your career?
Yeah, I really do. Especially at this phase of my career when I always say I'm not really in the game of pop music world anymore the way I used to be. When Donna passed away in 2012, it gave me, a moment of recovery, but also realignment of how I, carry on with my life from that point forward. You
Yeah.
know, songwriting was something that I've always done since my teens, and it was also a way for me to process through the tragedy that I experienced, and I got to write songs about loss and reinvention and also hope, and it came out in a record in an album called "With Angels on a Carousel," and
Mhm.
that sort of realigned my career and my phase of life, and I you know, stepped out into this world of solo artist, singer songwriter, where I write songs about, I say what I want to say the way I want to say it. And it's been challenging, but challenge is great.
Sure.
You need to have purpose in your life and a reason, to get up and it's, so it was a new challenge for me at this point in my life, and it's been, a really great experience. I think I put out 6 albums since that time, and continue to be inspired and have passion, and I've grown as a performer. I never really had to stand on a stage by myself and engage an audience.
Right. That's got to be
And,
terrifying, right? I mean,
yeah,
especially if you're not used to it.
yeah. I mean, I was always the guy who was standing next to the guy. And I was very comfortable in that position. But it was like life threw me this, let's say opportunity, and reason to do it. And so it was challenging. It's been challenging. It always is. But I continue to grow in the role, and that's satisfying. You know.
And you said you put out 6 albums since about 2012, right? I mean,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then you had a whole career prior to that. Which, if you look back, which one was harder, or which one is harder, I should
Well,
say?
you know, I think you know I think I would say the previous one was harder in that, like I said, I'm playing by my own rules now.
Yeah.
So in the past there was a lot of direct competition. Uh, there was a lot of compromise when because I did a lot of collaborating.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of compromise involved. There's a lot of different personalities that you have to navigate. When you're writing for an artist, you have to take their point of view into consideration, which is only fair and only right. When I'm writing for somebody else, I want to know who they are. I want to know how they feel about things. I want to be able to give them something that they can, own.
Hmm.
So that has its built-in challenges. Everything has its challenges, but I'm really comfortable with where I am now. I like, especially, I collaborate with production and things like that. But as far as the songwriting goes, I like the ability to, as I said, say what I want to say in the way that I want to say it without having to make any compromises.
Right. And I imagine at this stage in your career, because of the success you've had, people probably don't challenge you as much as they do. I'm sure you still get challenged, or maybe even just, hey, maybe try it this way, or what about this type of idea? But the fact that you have a resume that can go on for a few days as far as what you've done, that kind of has some clout. And I imagine the record industry, or the music industry, I should say, is just it's much different than it was back in the 70s and 80s and even earlier.
Yeah, absolutely. But I'm not one of those who complains about changes in the music business. The music business since I began in it, and I think since the beginning of the music business, it's been about change, and it's
Mhm.
always going to change, and it's always going to evolve. And there's really no point in lamenting what was. It's about what is, and adapting to it and moving with it, and you know the, I don't see any point in resisting. I mean, there is the thing of how you get paid, and that's changed, and
Yeah.
and that's a little bit different, and that's something that, yeah, you have to find ways to fight for and navigate around and through and try to make it more equitable. I mean, typically I always say the songwriters are at the bottom of that food chain. And it's kind of a weird irony because the song is where it all starts.
Right.
But I mean, I always say I think it has something to do with the nature and the temperament of songwriters. Is that we're not always the best at fighting for our rights. Our heads are definitely, we fight on a different plane. Through the music, through our lyrics, through so. But anyway,
Well, I imagine that's tough though, just Because when you're in the music business, it's all about the music, as far as the musician side of it. You want to do the music that you want to do and play it and perform it. You don't really think about publishing rights and who has this because, at the time, especially when you started, you were a kid, right?
Yeah,
And you'll take what, somebody, especially back then, there was no YouTube, right? So if a record company wanted to make an album, you kind of had
yeah,
to just go
yeah,
with that. And that was the dream, right? To get discovered by a record
yeah,
company that wanted to
absolutely.
sign you. And
Yeah, and it's still that way. It's always going to be that way when you're going to have to pay a price
yeah, and nothing's
for
free.
that chance. For the opportunity. There's always that trade-off. But I was fortunate. To learn. Because it's about learning. Morris Levy when I was a teenager, and Morris Levy was the president of Roulette Records, and I would go up and say, I have a hit record. How come I'm not getting any money? And he'd just say, here, kid, and he'd write me a check, and never saw a royalty statement. But he told me, uh, uh, the money's in the publishing. That he taught me then.
Oh, wow.
Always remember that the money. So from early on, I started navigating a world where I was acquiring my publishing and fighting for my publishing rights and 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 building that world. It's something that I've done for myself and something that I did with Donna. And so on that side of it, I was able to navigate it and learn it and accomplish that. I mean, but like I said, in the beginning, I had to give up stuff,
Yeah,
all these years later, I was able to acquire back rights to things that I had to give up back then.
man,
So
valuable lesson though to learn at the age that you did learn that the music is all the
absolutely,
publishing.
it's one of the most valuable lessons that I ever learned about the music business.
Yeah, I'm sure that lesson helped pay for the place in Milan, right? Like, you,
Absolutely, yeah,
yeah, I mean that's the dream, right? To be able to do what you love and be rewarded for it. And
yeah.
you started off early in your career with the Brooklyn Dreams, and it's funny. I was digging through some stuff on the internet and looking up. Old music videos or just videos in general. And when I was reading some of the comments that people had for Brooklyn Dreams, one person, the last comment on there, they posted that they used to see, and if this is true or not, I don't know. That's what I'm gonna ask you. But did you guys used to have a van that you used to drive around in Brooklyn that had the name of the band on the side of the van?
No.
No. Well, then I
No,
don't know what that person saw, but
you
that's what
know,
they said they would see that van
when
in Brooklyn.
yeah, we were, first of all, back in Brooklyn, the band was alive and kicking. That was the first band I had. Brooklyn Dreams wasn't formed until later on in the '70s when we formed as a group in Los Angeles.
Oh,
The three of us were out in LA, and that's where we formed Brooklyn Dreams. And so there was never a band, but there might, maybe they were referring to one of the other bands. A lot of groups back in the day. I remember, there was one. I forgot the name of the band. It might have been the Lost Souls or something like that. But they had a hearse. So
oh.
they stuck all their equipment in the hearse, and they had their name on the side of the hearse, and they drove from gig to gig that way. So
Or it could have been an admirer or somebody you went to high school with or grammar school with that was like, wait a minute, no, he's from this neighborhood, so we're gonna
yeah,
put this on the car. We'll drive it around as an homage because like
yeah,
you're from the old city, right? I mean, that's how
yeah.
people are
Well,
proud of people. I feel like even here in Chicago, when somebody rises through the rankings of just the neighborhoods to ascend
absolutely.
to levels you were, they're just proud of it, and they'll kind of make it their own as an homage to you.
Absolutely, and I'm a big fan of Brooklyn and the spirit of Brooklyn and what all that means, and um, so I support that. Make up whatever stories you want.
But Alive and Kicking, you did perform at the Garden when asked what your dreams were by Dick Clark and American Band. Do you want to tell that story? Just because it's a fun, great story, and if you
Well,
could talk about Dick
yeah.
Clark, is always cool.
um, I was one of the fortunate ones who got to do American Bandstand with two different bands. You
Hmm.
know,
That's got to be pretty
and
rare.
but Yeah, the first time I was on American Bandstand, it was 1970 with Alive and Kickin', and you know, when asked what my dream was, it was to be able to play Madison Square Garden, later on that year, we got to play the Felt Forum at Madison Square Garden with Eric Burden and War, and
Wow.
we got presented our gold record that night for Tighter Tighter, and so yeah, I mean, young boy's dream has a moment. So
Not only that, but you got the gold record too on the same day. I mean, that's kind of
yeah, yeah, it was nice. Yeah.
and that record that you just mentioned, Tighter and Tighter, that was kind of a pivotal moment, at least from what I read, a pivotal moment for you and just the learning the art of songwriting and you know, kind of getting some valuable tips from your writing partner.
Well, yeah, you know, Alive and Kicking was, you know, a group that worked its way up in the tri-state area club circuit, you
Hmm.
know. And in 1968, we were the house band at this place called Cheetah in Manhattan. It was kind of like the number one club at the time. We were playing 6 nights a week, you know, 5 sets on, 40, you know, 40 minutes on, 20 minutes off, you know.
Hmm.
Tommy James came in one night. I got to meet Tommy as an aspiring songwriter. You know, he was, you know, one of the biggest stars in America at that particular moment. And, you know, he was very gracious with me. He lived around the corner. I'd run over to his apartment on breaks and try to write songs with him. And, you know, learned a lot. Got to co-write Ball of Fire with him, and it was my first chart record. And he was the first guy to bring me into a recording studio and show me how a real record was made. You know, back in those days, you didn't have things to record on so much. You know,
Right.
it was hard to even afford for a kid in Brooklyn a two-track tape recorder, which was basically all that existed. You know, I would have to sit and write, you know, memorize the song. I would play it so many times over and over again because I didn't want to forget this new song I wrote. And so anyway, Tommy opened a lot of doors for me, and you know, but once Alive and Kicking, you know, had its moment, we put out a few hit singles after that. You know, and I left the band, you know, and ended up moving back into the basement of my parents' house and spent the next few years really working on my songwriting and refining it and you know, listening a lot to a lot of different people to learn. And you know, Tommy was certainly a mentor. You know, there's a guy named Fred Ebb who I rarely mention, but
Hmm.
he wrote Cabaret. You know, he was a huge writer, lyric writer in the Broadway world. You know, and he took me under his wing and encouraged me. You know, so anyway, I wrote a bunch of songs, uh, moved to LA, formed Brooklyn Dreams, and a bunch of those songs became, you know, the foundation of the first Brooklyn Dreams album. And it's been straight ahead since then, you know.
What it in all those lessons from all those different people, like when you first started out, you know, on the meat streets of Brooklyn, trying to get your start in writing, and then after that, where you moved to LA, what was the biggest difference in your songwriting?
Well, you know, I think you know, it's really I continue to grow as a songwriter. You know,
Hmm.
as a songwriter, you know, it's always about refining what you do and having new inventive ways and to say it and you know concise. You know, all of these things. So it's you know I just think it's always ongoing refining of what you're doing. You know, and you know that doesn't mean that you know every song you write is great, you know, but along the way you know I've you know had moments where greatness shows up and then you know it disappears for a while, but you know you just have to keep swinging the bat, you know, and every now and then you know you get a single or you know you hit one in the gap or you know you get lucky and it goes over the fence, you
Yeah,
know, you just so I just keep swinging the bat, working on my swing, working, you know,
yeah. Well,
like
it's
that.
funny that you mentioned that. You know, I was reading something the other day, and it was a book about like success and people talking about success. And Jerry Seinfeld said, it was talking about writing and comedy writing, and this is what he said. It was more of, there's no such thing as writer's block. He's like, you just have to keep writing, and when you
Yeah,
keep writing and you get through it, and he's like, you might have 100 bad things until
yeah,
you find that one thing. And then there was
yeah,
like this chart, and it showed all these like Frank Sinatra and other people, and how many songs they came out with in their lifetime, and how many of them were the hits. And they were like, I think the highest percentage was 17%.
yeah,
And and some of the, and then like, Bill Gates and what he's done, he was at like 2%. And the point is that it takes
yeah,
so many tries to get
yeah,
to
yeah,
hit the one. And I
yeah.
think it was speaking to the younger generation now, who's so used to things feeling instant,
Quick,
like you can
yeah,
type up in YouTube and you can get something instantly, or on
yeah,
Spotify, I want to hear this
yeah,
song now,
yeah, yeah.
versus back in the day when, you had to wait for the song to come on the radio to hear it, or,
And you had to go to the store to buy it, and all of the above. Yeah, absolutely.
yeah,
You know, but
it's
show up and
fascinating.
keep swinging the bat. That's what it is. I mean, for me, it was always helpful because I knew in my heart and soul what I was called to do. For me, songwriting, I viewed it as a vocation.
Mm.
And so there are always moments when you feel like, giving up, because it's like nothing is happening,
Hmm.
and certainly there were, you know, but here's another lesson I learned,
Uh-huh.
somewhere along the way, and I think it was the early 90s, I had a very frustrating time as a songwriter in the 80s because what was happening in the 80s songwriting wise was not my natural place. You know, my strengths lie in storytelling and emotion and connecting sensitively. I'm
Hmm.
not like a super clever lyrically guy songwriter. And the 80s was very much about that. Kiss on My List or Maneater. I'm quoting Hall and Oates.
Pop songs, catchy
Sorry,
pops, like,
I
yeah.
love those guys. I admire them. I don't mean to like put them in any negativity, but this just wasn't my strength. So there's this one point in the early 90s. I was like, I went to a bagel seminar. You know, and I'm like, maybe I'll just open a bagel shop. I don't. That's how verklempt I was.
Oh my! I thought you were telling me a joke for a second there. You
No,
went to an actual bagel shop
yeah,
seminar?
yeah.
Wow.
And I'm sitting there, and these guys are getting up and they're talking about, I get to my bagel shop at 4 a.m. every morning. Look at this bagel. This is the best bagel in the world. And slowly, as these guys are talking, I'm like sinking down in my seat because I'm realizing I don't give a shit about a bagel. I care about songs, you
Right.
know? And so I walked out of there with a renewed sense of purpose of like, this is what you're called to do. It's up and down. There's going to be peaks and valleys. Live with it and just carry on, and get better at what you're doing and stay the course, So it was an interesting moment in my career, but it realigned me and repurposed me, and that was after having a lot of success as a songwriter. I
Well, I
had
was
that.
gonna say, I mean, that was almost like
Yeah,
like a brief renaissance for you. Just to
yeah,
you needed a
yeah,
kickstart. Just
yeah,
and
yeah.
it kind of goes to my next question of like, when you are in that writing process, like, do you recall a time of any song where you're like, you look around and you write the song, and you're like, oh, this is really fucking good. Like, I know this is good. Like, this
Yeah,
is. Or
yeah,
did you ever not have that? Or you're like, I think it's good. Well, like, oh, here you go. What do you think? Or we're gonna play it.
yeah. I mean, I never know what's good. I mean that's a two-sided answer. I know exactly what good is.
Right.
I know exactly what good is. I know for me, for my interpretation of what's good, because I don't, finish a song until I think it's good. I mean, until I think it's right. But other people's perception of what good is, of what they're looking for, of what they need, of what's popular, all these other things are other qualifications of what's good.
Ah, I
You
see.
know, and those kind of things I don't always know. I always do my best. Uh, I wouldn't put it out there if I didn't think it was good.
Sure.
I have to satisfy myself first. I've learned over time too. I'm my best critic, and what other people say. It's not that I don't care about what they think, but I can't let that deter me. Because people have opinions about everything, and the challenge is between me and myself.
Sure.
I'm always fighting to be the best version of me that I can be, and whatever else anybody thinks, I've learned not to really care about because it that doesn't help. You know.
But I imagine that you had to care a little bit when you were writing songs for your wife, right? I mean, that the working relationship, professional relationship, was that tough for you, or was that easy? Because I remember you saying earlier that you really had to like get in their frame of mind when you're writing songs for somebody, and really understand them. Did that help you with Donna, or was it harder, or was it a little bit of both and
No,
all the
I, mean,
same?
writing with Donna was always a breeze. And it's not that I care now and I didn't care then. I've always cared.
Sure,
I've
sure.
always really cared about the song and about the record, and I've always, you know, I'm 100% in. So writing with Donna is a breeze. Was a breeze. It was fun. It was free. That's the thing. I had a little bit of a tough time in the Nashville uh, um, kind of songwriting situation where you do 3 sessions a day and you write 3 songs a day. There were times in that kind of system where I got frustrated because I was feeling like I was making compromises that I wasn't comfortable with in terms of whatever line was chosen or what people's perception of what good is and what cool is a moving target,
Sure.
and it's a so but many instances of co-writing, I never had a problem with Donna because it was always free. It was always free, and there was a unison of we got it, so and many of my collaborations are that way, so and I think in the Nashville thing, there's for me, it was a lot of setup kind of meetings that to write with people you're set up with, and
Oh,
everybody that you write with, you don't have that sense of freedom and unity of vision and compatibility. So and a lot of times when I write in those situations, I'm a little intimidated sometimes, and so there's a little bit of my own insecurity and my own issues that get thrown into that mix, but.
who gave you some like when you walked in a room? Who was the person the most that you were intimidated by,
Oh, I don't even know. It's not typical. It's not really a person that
or
intimidates
situation?
me. Yeah, yeah. It's. I don't know. I don't know.
Or
I
maybe a
can't.
better question,
It was.
the
I was never intimidated by if I was writing. With Rod Stewart. I don't get intimidated in that kind of situation. It's more. Because in that situation you know, I will always give the artist, you know, because they have to sing the song and they're the artist. So if they don't like something, I'm happy to accommodate their vision. I don't feel like I'm compromising something in the song. I may say I think this is better, but I go with you. I
sure.
happily surrender that. Uh, um, but in the situation where it was a 3-2 thing and it's a setup meeting and what's the title for today and I'm not great in that. I like to sit and simmer with a lyric and live with it and let it go in me until I feel I got everything the best it can be. And I think in a lot of those situations, it was just too quick. Boom, song done for the day. Next song, boom, done for the day. And people work great in that system. People thrive in it. It just wasn't good for me.
I've listened to folks over the years talk about this, certain songs they have written that, come out in 5 minutes, and it could be one of the biggest songs of that year that took them 5 minutes, and then other songs took them 5 years or 15 years to write. Have you had any of that kind of uh, pathway in writing songs? Or some, because you mentioned sometimes you got to churn them out because that's the writing day or whatever, but have sometimes where you're like, wow, that was easy, I don't, and then, or that one took forever, and anything in between?
Yeah. Yeah, I think the take forever situation I don't have. I think when a song is taking forever for me, after a while, I'm like, okay, I'm not writing this song. And I don't typically wind up going back to things and you know, I when I'm working on a song or couple of songs, when I'm in that kind of cycle, I will, after maybe a couple of weeks, reapproach something, and try to get a fresh take on it and see it. I'll do that in the immediate, but like 7 months down the line, I don't typically come back to a song. I have too many other ones that I'm rolling with, kind of that. Uh, and I tend to kind of focus on one at a time,
Sure.
In terms of the other side of the situation, there is one song. It's called "I'm a Rainbow." It was the title of one of Donna's albums.
Hmm.
She sang it, but it was one of the songs that I wrote. That came quickly. I don't know how it came. I'm like, wow, I don't know how I wrote that song. So that's that song for me.
Wow.
So yeah.
That's a great. Thank you for sharing. A lot. Sometimes people don't want to say it, but I appreciate you sharing that, just because I always find it interesting. And a lot of times when songs like that happen, every person I've asked and watched interviews or listened to it, they all kind of say the same thing. Like, I have no idea where it came from,
Yeah,
but I'm glad it came. And
yeah,
I'm glad that I was able to be the one to give it to the world that they
yeah,
did.
yeah, yeah.
Do you prefer writing over performing, or are they completely different where you can't even compare?
Um, they're completely different, but I thoroughly enjoy both. But writing is really home for me. Songwriting, that's kind of where when I get out of whack, that's where if I sit down and just do that, where I know who I am again. It's like, okay, you
Like, it
know,
almost centers yourself.
it centers me. Yeah, yes. And performing is something that I've done since I was a kid. So I love being on stage. Uh, um, you know, it's fun because the song is written, you know the words, you know the chords, it's just get up there and perform it. And certainly as a solo performer, there's an added pressure. You know, I always marveled with Donna, of being on stage with Donna. I sang background with her and did work with her, live for years.
Yeah.
You know, and but when all the focus is on you, that's a pressure. That's an added pressure. And I would always marvel at her because there would be thousands of people in the audience, and the energy would be so, vibrant. It's like the waves are just going. And I'd be standing on that stage, behind the background singer
Hmm.
mic, and my knees would be shaking. And she would just come out and like boom, spot on, rise to the occasion.
Wow.
And so that's something that obviously I'm not doing it for thousands of people, but you have to learn. There's a pressure there, and you learn to you know get in that moment and create an atmosphere. That's what I'm learning to do. To when I write my songs, there's an atmosphere, there's a headspace that I'm in, there's an energy that I feel. And so being able, I'm still learning how to get into that pocket of comfort and creating that atmosphere to perform the song, to translate it as well as I can to an audience so they get the point of the song.
Do you have a song that, on a either every time you go out and perform, that you really enjoy playing, or does that change, year by year or show by show?
It kind of changes because some nights I hit the mark in my I'm hitting the mark for myself. The audience doesn't always know one way or the other. But some nights I hit the mark on one song and miss it on another, and it's like in my mind, I don't know if everybody has this, but maybe they do. But in my mind, there's so much going on when I'm performing a song. Is that there are so many variables that can be off in my mind. Oh, I hit that chord wrong, or the bass is too loud, or I don't like this light in my eye, or there's so many little things that are happening.
Sure.
Stay in the song, Bruce. Let the song speak. That's what I keep telling myself. Don't, it's just, you know.
I like that. Uh, for budding musicians, and I've had this conversation, it, like I feel like for the last 20 years, because music is, mainstream music, I should say, has changed so much, and what has come out, and what's available. For budding musicians who are coming up in the world, I've heard several takes on. It's better to perhaps maybe be by yourself because it's easier for a record company to take notice for a one person band, let's say, versus a band of people in a band, like 5-person band versus solo. But then I feel like when somebody does it all by themselves, who's up and coming and not a seasoned veteran, you lose a little bit of like all the influences of the people in the band versus a full band where, this guy might have grown up in jazz and this girl could have grown up in blues and,
Sure,
all
absolutely.
that comes together and you get that sound. Like where's your take on that? Like if somebody's listening who's like really wants to be in a band,
Sorry. Sorry.
it's okay. Like what do you think? Or is it just whatever seems to be their best fit?
Yeah, I don't think there's any best way. I think, you know, I think you walk down your path and different doors open, and they're not always the doors that you anticipate. But I've always been a believer in walking into open doors. You're knocking here, knocking here, knocking here, and then a door opens here. Okay, walk through that door. So some people's path, they may be surrounded by great people and they have a band energy, and it works. And yeah, you can develop a uniqueness with a band. That was one of the things as a kid. And I think it was very much part of that culture of the '60s and the '70s was to develop your own unique sound.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was a mantra and a foundational element of musicality in that moment. I think a lot of some of that these days is really lost in the other side of that, which is try to sound like everybody's sounding,
Yeah.
so you can have that place, and um, I have when I'm in Milan, I have an Italian band, and the band is made up of a percussionist, a cellist, a bass, and me on acoustic guitar singing my songs. But the
Awesome.
instrumentation of that band is so much fun for me because it gets me to reimagine all these songs with different instrumentation, and it's so much fun and brings so much new life to the songs, and songs that don't work with my band here or work solo. I do them with the Italian band, and they create a whole other different magic. And I'll go back to that word atmosphere again. The
Ah,
atmosphere that kind of instrumentation brings is different than when I'm just playing it solo and or with a band here in LA. So
oh man, Bruce, thank you so much for taking time to chat with me and share some of
yeah,
your story. For people who want to find out more information about you, see when you're on tour and if you're coming to their town, where's the best spot for them to find that?
obviously BruceSudano.com, all the social, Instagram, all of the above, as
Well,
we all do these days.
yeah. Well, thank you, Bruce.
Thanks, Tom. Appreciate it. Good talking.